We've been in chapter 25 and chapter 26, and I want you to just, from memory and from what we've studied just in the last 3 times, or even if you want to look through your Bible in Genesis chapters 25 and 26, what are some of the highlights and the lowlights of Jacob's life so far? Starting in about 25, 22, 21, somewhere in there kind of starts the story. What are some of the highlights and lowlights of Jacob's early years?
He was born a twin.
Born a twin. He was a grasping twin, and the 2 boys struggled and fought and warred against each other so much, even in their mother's womb, that she thought there was a serious problem with her pregnancy. The Lord reveals to her, well, yeah, there is a struggle, and it's because what? What's going on inside there? The eldest is going to serve the youngest. 2 actual nations are in utero. And these 2 nations will struggle from not long after conception until this day. I mean, they just continue to be in this combative relationship. The boys grow up, and it seems that they have some natural bents. And we know all of our children have natural bents, and we know we have natural bents. Those natural bents sometimes are going in the wrong direction, and a good parent and a good coach and a good mentor and a good pastor and a good youth pastor and a good mom and a good dad will be trying to reshape those branches and take all of that energy and focus it and move it into a healthy direction. But it seems as though mom and dad in this case take some natural bents and don't necessarily shape them in the right direction, and the boys begin to have probably even more problems because of what has happened with mom and dad in their relationship with the 2 boys. Favoritism sets in. Mom likes the younger better, dad likes the older, and they've already got difficulties amongst them, and now that's being exasperated by the relationship that mom and dad are having, and it's not healthy. The boys have their real first public conflict, though I'm sure by now there have been knockdown, drag-out kind of episodes in these boys' lives. They finally, probably in young adulthood, have a tremendous conflict over the birthright, and Jacob kind of swindles his brother Esau out of his birthright, though we are told that Esau by this point had despised that birthright. He didn't want the responsibilities. He didn't want all that came with that. I mean, what good are all these future responsibilities? What good are all these future blessings? What good is all this future inheritance? I'm hungry now. So we kind of get an insight into his background. The younger brother is thinking about the future. He's thinking, now's my moment to get this because of how it's going to pay off down the road. So, I mean, they are different in all the respects of their life. We get, in chapter 26 last week, we come to a place in which now mom and dad begin a particular course of action that you know the boys are watching. What's most unusual or most worth noting in chapter 26? We looked at last week. Famine comes into the land. Don't go down to Egypt like your dad did. Instead, hang close. He makes a relationship with the Philistines, probably in what is Gaza these days, probably in the Gaza region of Israel. Meets a king, Abimelech, and is worried. Although God has just told him, I'm with you. Nothing's going to happen to you. Your seed, your offspring are going to be as numerous as the sand of the shores, which means nothing's going to happen to you. Nothing's going to happen to your wife. You're going to have this wonderful life in which I'm going to bless and guide and direct you. And as soon as he gets into a little bit of trouble, what's he do with his wife?
He
Says it's his sister, which is a half-truth. and throws her under the bus because he's worried about who? Himself. Numero uno. I was worried you might kill me, which is exactly what his dad had done years before. This time, though, the boys get to watch it. Isaac didn't watch his dad do this because Isaac wasn't born yet. But these two boys are in young adulthood, so they've got to know what mom and dad are doing. And they have got to go along with it. And it apparently is going on for a long period of time until, and bless their heart, this older couple is spooning where the king can see them. Because the text in the Hebrew is kind of a euphemism. They were laughing together is a very nice Hebrew way of saying they were probably enjoying the blisses of marital life, but got a little too public, and the king sees it. Kind of like David did with Bathsheba.
This one says he was caressing his wife.
That's probably not a bad in my the King James. Yeah, what translation is that out of?
The
American Standard. Yeah, I think the King James talks about it as he was laughing with her, which is another kind of like a euphemism, try to keep this all very rated G material. But now the king sees this deception that the mom and dad have been playing, the boys have been watching, so they've learned that, if you get in trouble, you have difficulties. One way to deal with that is to be deceptive, to be deceiving, to lie. They end up having to, look, you got to get out of here. We'll look at that. I'm sure you guys looked at that last week. You need to leave because you could have brought shame on us. Somebody could have taken your wife, and then you would have brought guilt upon us as a people. You need to leave. Take her with you. They leave. He doesn't stay put very long. He keeps meeting with conflict. Dad does, Isaac, and he's demonstrating to his boys another way of dealing with conflict. Because as soon as he gets to one spot and digs a well, he has conflict with the locals, then he ends up running to another spot. He thinks, okay, I'm not gonna deal with this issue, I'm going to another location. Because haven't you been there when you thought, what's gonna solve this? Go somewhere else. And then when you get somewhere else, the same problem is there, it's just a different face. That happens in this text 3 times. And it's like, all I need to do is just get somewhere different and it'll be better. And then if you've watched somebody do this, and if you're self-aware enough of your own issues, you'll realize after you do that 2 or 3 times that the only common denominator is you. Right? You're the one who can't deal with whatever the issue is that you keep jumping out of, hoping that the next place it'll get better. Finally, the Lord speaks to him again, and they settle down. But tonight, we're going to I don't want to go too quickly through this because this is some important stuff to discuss. We need 1 or 2. 2, please. You sure? I got lots of them. You guys sharers or that? I have a couple of extra binders. If anybody needs a binder for your notes. Just pass those around. I thought it would be worth us discussing because remember what we're trying to do is we're trying to watch this family. This is an amazing family that we get a glimpse into more than probably any other family story in the whole Old Testament. We've got this amazing family story, and we can learn through this family study because we should be able to see ourselves in this family study. We ought to be able to see our family in this family study. And we ought to be able to see our church family in this family study. And so I don't want to rush through this because these are some really great personal lessons for us as individuals, as members of families, and member of this church family. And so what I want to talk about is generational conflict resolution skills. And the reason I called it generational is because most of the time we resolve conflict the way we learned how to resolve conflict from our parents or grandparents or those people who help shape and form our lives. That's where we learn it. We'll either go through life continuing it and then passing it on, or we have to relearn it and go, that behavior is going to stop. Our family needs to stop throwing the women under the bus and telling everybody they're our sister. That needs to stop, that kind of thing. And so we don't want to gloss over this, because I think there's a lot for us to chew on and really think about as we think about this generational conflict resolution in their skills, but some of these skills are not good skills. I mean, it is the deceptive skills that are learned by these two boys from their mom and dad are amazing. I mean, you want to talk about deceiving people. They are masters at this. But this is not a skill that is going to be beneficial to the home, to the community, and as they're because he's going to have boys, and we're going to eventually get there. But his boys deceive him in a way that crushes his heart. They tell him that his favorite son has been consumed by a wild animal. And they've got the garment and the story, and they're sticking to it. Where did they learn this masterful skill of deception? Well, it's generational. Unless somebody goes, this behavior needs to stop now. And you take the action necessary to make that happen. Now, page 8 in your outline, there seems to be a direct connection between our relationship with God, and especially in the areas we're contending with Him. We're contending with God. Will I obey Him? Will I follow Him? Will I allow Him to have His guidance and direction in this area of my life? He's promised me these promises, but am I going to take things into my own hands? In that area, there's a connection between that struggle and the struggles we have with other people, because we often treat both scenarios similarly. And I think what we're really going to see is that this is a man who is not just wrestling with the people in his life. He's been wrestling with God in his life, his whole life. And it finally comes to a head almost towards the end of his life, when he literally goes hand to hand with God, lives to tell about it, but has his hips separated and walks with a horrible, painful limp the rest of his life, because there's this connection between his struggles with God and his struggles with everyone else. But also is true is that when we can find rest with God, we can find rest with other people as well. And that's where we want to get to in our life. When we demonstrate spiritual immaturity and conflict resolution, we're really revealing the immaturity of our spiritual life by not obeying the conflict resolution principles in God's Word. God realizes we are a people at conflict with Him and with others, and He's given us wonderful principles here on how to deal with those conflicts, how to resolve them. Instead of following God's principles and faithfully resting in His means and methods, we often want to take matters into our own hands, and we're going to see that repeated over and over again in the story of the life of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the 12 boys that end up making up this nation that is still at odds with everyone around it for many reasons, but they do have a hard time getting along with each other. So I want to talk about conflict is definitely inevitable in the day and age, in these fallen lives, fallen world that we live in, but how, when, and why we address it is essential. So from the text, I want us to look at typical conflict resolution methods. At least they're typical for this family, and you might find them typical, or you might have some experience with this kind of thing in your own life and family life. In Genesis 25:22, we learn that these boys are struggling within their mother's womb to the point that she's worried that her pregnancy might be in jeopardy. They are battling with one another. And so in Genesis chapter 25, verse 22, one of the typical conflict resolution methods is to just fight it out, to see who can physically win and dominate the circumstances. Either they argue more masterfully, they argue louder, they've got some kind of like lawyer brain that just is able to take every circumstance and flip it around on you, and they can just out argue you, out yell you, out physicality you. They will just fight. They might even have a little bit of a bent to want to. I think there are people that I have met over time that are just waiting for a good fight. What ends up inevitably happening though, and you can start from verse 23, the days gave, the inevitable consequences. Now you've got this conflict in between people and nation. One ends up stronger than the other and dominating. So you end up with a servant, master, you end up with a subservient dominator. You have this drastic conflict or relationship contradiction happening, where there's just this dominance and this subservience, this somebody who's kept in their place and somebody who keeps them in their place. Have you witnessed relationships like that? What inevitably happens in those relationships? Flee. We'll get to that. So sometimes they stay in a relationship. We're going to get to the flee part in a minute.
Well, sometimes though, the one does decide that. We have two grandsons who one was very big, the other messed with him. I heard her scream one day, and Lawson had Walker by the neck, and he would just, and he never did that ever.
You had enough.
Sometimes you've had enough.
You've had enough, and it can escalate.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, usually it escalates. It escalates. Somebody can get extremely injured, and that fight ends up with where we have murder and killing one another. And
this one that bad.
No, I mean that was the first one out of Cain and Abel, right? I mean they just that conflict was there, and he just took it out on him with that physicality. And just that desire to fight it out, yell it out, scream it out, and often that's what you've learned. If you grow up in a home where whoever yells the loudest wins, you'll have a tendency to either extreme. You'll be the one who yells the loudest and wins, or you say nothing because you weren't the one who yelled the loudest, and so you don't want to get anybody going, so you don't say a word about things.
Or you want them to be quiet. You want everyone
Yeah, because you just want everyone to be quiet. So you just don't want to
be nice.
get anything going. Yeah, in there. So there's this fight method. Genesis 25 and 28 is another F. What's happening in 25, 28? That would start with an F. Favoritism. That's where you choose sides to resolve the conflict. You choose sides, and then what you do is you try to get more people on your side than their side. And so you try to get others to choose sides, and you tell your story in a specific way in order for them to see that you are absolutely correct. Because you will master that story so that the other person is just clearly in the wrong, and you are clearly in the right. And if you can get more people to be favorable to your side, you'll win. And that's another method. We're working to see who has the favorite. What ends up happening in that kind of a situation? You ever been in one of those where you're trying to choose up sides?
This is kind of common in families too. there's a lot of testosterone going in the father and,
You've noticed this?
and then there's a mama's boy
Oh.
who is a little lacking,
Uh-huh.
possibly.
Okay.
So
And then you,
he's a good setup to be a victim.
yes, then he's a setup to be a victim, sure.
Until he's had enough.
Until he's had enough. That favoritism things ended up dividing people. And people end up taking on other people's issues that weren't theirs. And all of a sudden you get divided over something that's not even, you become part of a problem that wasn't even yours. But now you've been brought into it to choose sides, and now you're in a conflict that wasn't your conflict. It wasn't even your business. But you got brought in because there's this method of solving problems, which is to gain a majority, get favoritism towards your side of things. There's another one that is we find with between the two boys, and I've called it abandoning. I'm done. I don't want this silly birthright thing. You can have it. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I don't want to deal with it anymore. I'm hungry. Give me that. You can have it. And they just abandon the situation. It's some boy that I remember kids like this. They and the thought. We even have a little phrase around it, and I watch it happen all the time. The kid who brought the football ends up getting knocked down too hard, doesn't get the penalty that he wants, so he takes his football and goes home, and the rest of us standing around with no ball, and we're just like, I guess we're going home too, because he took the ball and left. It was his, right. And he just abandoned us. I'm like, I don't want to play anymore. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm taking my ball and going home. And the other people are left with like, now what?
They need to get a ball.
They have their own ball.
Bring your own ball.
Bring your own ball, exactly. So you just take the ball and leave. You're just going to abandon. I mean, we have families we have women whose husbands are just like, I'm done. I'm not talking about this anymore. I'm not worried about it. I'm gone. And women, we have families who the wife does the same thing. Could be a difficult circumstance. Not saying that's not, but the conflict gets to a point where I'm done. I'm out of here. And they walk away. Doesn't solve anything. Usually they walk away, start a relationship that's somewhat similar, and now they're back to the same inability to resolve the conflict because all they've done is just walked away each time. It got too tough. It got too difficult. They just walk out. We've been there, seen that, watched that. Might be us. These are possible in churches, though. We take these tendencies, our families take these tendencies. You've been maybe in a church where there was just contention. They just wanted to fight. Somebody was just looking for an issue to fight about. There's an organization called the IFCA, the Independent Fundamental Churches of America. It's a reputable, very well-respected organization. John MacArthur's church is part of the FCA. So it's very well respected. But the joke for a long time was I'll fight Christians anywhere was really what the IFCA stood for. Because there was that element in fundamental Christianity that they just want to fight over any little issue. Let's just fight. We just get narrow, we get smaller and smaller and smaller until we're fighting with nobody because nobody's left to fight with anymore. You're all alone.
Or is it because people get offended all the time? I mean, there are some people that get real offended.
Or you just take on any issue, Let's fight because the pastor doesn't wear a tie on Sunday. And let's get up sides and figure out who should be on whose side, and we're just going to fight over that. And we'll fight over
decor.
The decor of the church.
Or the church music.
Especially if they end up throwing a drum on the stage. That'll freak people out right off the bat.
Whoa.
So let's just fight over stuff.
I don't want them just want to fight, but I think a lot of people are just offended real easily.
Real easy,
It's like,
yeah. And then they end up doing the favoritism things. Okay, who's on my side? Who thinks we should call a little meeting and get rid of that drummer? We'll call a little meeting and make the church secretary
You fight over certain issues. For instance, how old is the earth?
How old's what?
How
The
old's the earth?
genealogies.
Sure.
All
Yeah.
that.
Some things are worth fighting over.
Well,
and then some things,
some things
Yes.
are basic, and there are very few things that are basic, and then the other things that churches fight over are questionable.
yes.
What did you say? I didn't understand.
Like old earth, new earth, you know, some people
Oh.
get real hung up on that. Well, that's not really a basic of our Christianity. It's
Important Bible doctrine,
Jesus,
but maybe not a,
and, well, yeah.
some things are worth fighting on, then, you know, I think sometimes you
That's
just,
just an
sometimes
example.
you gotta keep the
Other
most
things.
important things the most important things. And finally, what we see him doing over and over again, that is Isaac, who's passing this on to his sons, is this willingness to flee, to run, and to try to make it better in the next location, never dealing with the issue, but just changing, as if to change a venue is gonna change their conflict resolution skills, because conflict is everywhere, and it just keeps showing itself up, and just by leaving a location, it doesn't in any way affect your conflict resolution skills, which you're just going to need in the next location, and if you don't have them there, it's just going to progress again then to the next location. And then what we're going to see is something that happens, and it's 6 in your outline, and we'll stop with this, is a conflict resolution skill that is practiced by a pagan Philistine king, Abimelech, is a specific personal dialogue. He and his two cohorts come with him to have a sit down with Isaac. A face-to-face, hey, let's talk about this. And of all the people in the story that you would have thought wouldn't have had this conflict resolution skill, it would have been one of God's people, right? No, it's a pagan king who decides he's going to have a talk with Isaac. He does it on 2 occasions, and we'll look at those, because what we're going to see is there's going to be 3 principles, there's going to be, no, not 3, there's going to be 8 really great principles on how to address conflict. And what's going to be amazing is we're going to see these unfolding in this dialogue that King Abimelech and his men have with Isaac as they try to work their way through the problems that they're facing with these 2 great groups of people being so close to one another. And we'll look at that next week.